Hello, friends in Cairo. This is Roger Beachy from the Danforth Center in St. Louis, Missouri. Dr. Nagla, I apologize for not being able to be there in person today. It's been kind of a rough few weeks for me health-wise, and it wasn't wise for me to travel again. I'm very pleased to have been asked to present this plenary talk for this important conference, and hope that through this video you'll get a sense of how I think the future of agriculture biotechnology is placed. I hope that the honored guests at your meeting and ministers who might see this, and to others who attend your conference can gain from this information that many of us who have been working in the agriculture biotechnology fields for now more than 2 decades have great confidence in the process, great confidence in what it can deliver in improving seeds for the world's agriculture, and can provide a vibrant and vital move forward in agriculture that has not been possible without the use of a knowledge base, a knowledge-rich technology that builds on the back of existing science and technology in agriculture to create a future of more abundance, of better nutrition, and more sustainable agriculture. So if I could, I'd like to go to the slides, and we'll talk about a few things. I'll give you a background, and then give you a sense of where I think the agriculture is going, and something that I hope will urge Egypt and other parts of the globe to adopt this growing and exciting technology, because it is only the first of the kind of technologies that in the future will lead us to more sustainable agriculture and more abundance, even in the face of growing climate changes and a growing population. Please excuse me if I have to stop now and again to catch my breath or drink a bit of hot tea, but we'll move through this, I hope, quite rapidly. So my title today, you can see as shown on the slide, is Agriculture Biotechnology and what is ahead in the future. This is the challenge of agriculture. I needn't read the slide. You can read it as well as I can say it. And that is to feed more people in a world that we hope will be economically more rich than it has been in the past, more able to afford abundance that we can provide. But we have limited land on which to do this work. We have now the current land that we have, and perhaps 10% more, according to the FAO, that might be put into agriculture production in the future. But this is not prime land, but there are other lands around the globe, including in Africa, in the continent of Africa, that has a capability of improving its own agriculture and putting more land into productivity. We know that we will need to increase the amount of food not only for humans but for their animals, because as we become more wealthy, we ask for more meat, more poultry, more beef, and this takes more grain production. And all of this is made more difficult by these 3 factors. We have competing demands for agriculture, not just for food and feed and the fiber that clothes us, but also for an economy of the future that will rely on biology, for biomaterials, for more bioenergy, for a whole raft of new things that in the next century must replace the petroleum sources that we rely on today. But there will be negative impacts, as we know, about from the changes in climate and weather patterns, and there's a demand that we have internationally that this agriculture be more sustainable than it has been in the past. The future of agriculture then must include these things, but in a sustainable manner. In a recent meeting, which is a lead-in to the recent G8 meeting, President Obama gave a talk in which he talked about the importance of security in food and nutrition. And these elements that are indicated here, he indicated as being important, and which agriculture is recognized as being important to meet the needs in food and nutrition security: water management, education, land reform, improved financing for those who do agriculture, improved seeds and all the allied technologies, develop markets, an insurance safety net for farmers and agriculturists so that they can, that even in calamities such as weather challenges and floods and droughts, there's a way for farmers to survive. We need government policies that support agriculture, and we need increasingly to work towards regional solutions to problems, not simply local ones. I want to talk primarily about improving seeds and the technologies that develop new seeds, because that's an important component, but certainly, as the President's mission statements indicates, it's not the only solution to achieve nutrition and food security, but it's an important one and one of the discussion today. So what do plant breeders do? And I don't have to tell this audience because you are knowledgeable in agriculture and the science and technology that leads to success. But this is what plant breeders have been doing for centuries. They identify the variability that's in nature and bring it into their materials for examination, for planting, and through natural breeding and crossbreeding, they develop new varieties that suit the local needs. When they couldn't find that variability, scientists learned after the Second World War, with the use of radiation, to do random mutagenesis of seeds, or chemical mutagenesis, to create the variability that nature might not have created. And that variability has been incorporated into plant breeding processes. More recently, scientists have learned how to, instead of using random mutagenesis, to introduce genes into our crop plants and others to create the variability through use of transgenes, or genes that have been developed from outside the plants and introduced by a method of genetic engineering. You can use this also to eliminate traits that we don't like, or inactivate genes, or actually to stack traits together to have a better combination of genes. New technologies that have developed in the last 5 years have improved the efficiency of genetic engineering and the accuracy of the kind of changes that can be made. They use advanced technologies to direct mutations to existing genes, to correct them, if you like, or to develop artificial chromosomes that can carry multiple transgenes. The technologies continue to develop. In the future, these technologies and others that will continue to be developed will develop plants and foods for better nutrition, better biofuels, more efficiency, and so forth. The history of biotechnology is relatively long. It began, excuse me, in 1950s with cell culture and cell fusion. In the 1980s, techniques for modern genetic engineering were developed, and then by as early as 1987, the regulations for how to grow agriculture, that is, developed through genetic engineering, was established in the U.S. through a process that was highly science-based. And then by 1996, the first commercialized crops were released, and the story goes from there. By 2012, the GM crops were grown successfully in 29 different countries, including 7 in the European Union and many of the nations in Latin America and in Asia. So this technology is only one of the many tools that are used by plant breeders to improve seeds. What we do know after now nearly 16, 17 years of agriculture is that the method of creating genetic engineering and genetically engineered or GM crops are safe. The method itself is safe. We now have a confidence that these crops are safe for the environment, safe for animals, and safe for humans as a consequence of all the science that's been done in the last 20 years. We know that it improves productivity and reduces farmer costs, and it improves the use of sustainable agriculture practices. All of these things, all of these facts that we've learned in the last 2 decades have convinced many of us in the science community, many of it in the policy community, that this technology is one that is safe to use. Several examples that I'm sure you have seen. This is a picture that was provided to me by I believe the Monsanto company, though it might have come from another source. This is of corn that's resistant to insects, an earworm, as well as a stalk borer. And you can see that the damage which is normally caused by insects is deflected, is prevented by the use of a gene which develops from a natural source of resistance against these kind of insects, these limited lepidopteran insects. The technology has also been used, a similar technology has been used in cotton to increase the productivity of cotton. In the upper left-hand corner, you can see the effects of an insect damage on cotton. And on the right-hand side, you see the effects of cotton that is resistant to insect attack. And you see that this work is going on not only in the developed economies, but also in developing economies, in this case, in Burkina Faso and Kenya. The potential is great, and in fact, it does reduce enormously the amount of the use of insecticides to control these insects. And as a consequence, the farmer has a healthier crop, a healthier family, but also reduced losses in his crop. A third example, this is a papaya. It's a relatively minor crop in the U.S., but it is grown in Hawaii. And here you see the devastating effects of a virus disease called papaya ring spot virus. It causes diseases, these symptoms on the papaya fruit, and significantly reduces production per se by causing abortion of the embryos. Through genetic engineering, using a strategy that was defined called pathogen-derived resistance, scientists actually stimulate the immune response of the plant to be naturally resistant against the disease. You can see the bottom two panels are of papaya, and you can see the healthy papaya trees in a field trial, as well as in production fields in Hawaii. The upper panel shows the same technology applied to squash, which is a cucurbit, and shows the resistant varieties that you can see in the upper right-hand panel. The upper part, and the uniform beige color, is a healthy papaya, a healthy squash, and the ones in the lower part are infected with the virus and are from the parent varieties rather than the genetically engineered varieties. From this kind of history of biotechnology crops, we find the following facts: that the insect-resistant crops reduce the use of insecticides dramatically around the world. That the use of herbicide-tolerant crops, I have not shown you photographs of that today, but they improve soil and sustainable agriculture production by a combination of things. Herbicide-tolerant crops enhance no-till agriculture, reduce the loss of topsoil, increase organic matter in soils. This increases the water holding capacity and helps the crops to be less susceptible to drought, reduces soil compaction, and so forth. Reduces the use of farm machinery and allows machinery to last longer, takes less labor to produce these crops, and saves fuel. Efficient agriculture saves the use of fuels, and of course it reduces the greenhouse gas emissions of agriculture as a consequence of all of these factors. These are components that we consider important in sustainable agriculture through agriculture biotechnology. This history now by this year, that since the crops were introduced in '96, they're now grown in 29 different countries, about 160 million hectares of land, 7 EU countries. Many more countries are importing GM crops and GM foods. It's been estimated that more than 2 trillion meals that contain GM foods have been consumed since the inception of this technology. And you should note, no evidence of a stomachache, an allergenic response, or health issues of any kind. There is simply no documentation of proof that this has happened. And scientists around the globe have looked at this process. In fact, no evidence of harm by GM crops to the environment or to agriculture. The European Union has spent more than 300 million euros on studies of safety of GM crops and have concluded over and over and over that there is not a safety issue either to the consumer or to the environment in which crops are grown. So that's the past. The future is quite different because it is changing. It's changing because of the changes in climate and the changes it demands in agriculture. And I mentioned this report to you because it was recently published by IFPRI, one of the CGIAR centers, and one that should perhaps be taken note of. And it reviewed the future of food security and the changes that are going to need to take place in order to achieve security. That's an important report, and very recently, just a few days ago, a press release from the European Environmental Agency accentuates some of their own findings with the following statement. The last decade was the warmest on record in Europe. with land temperatures 1.3 degrees centigrade warmer than the pre-industrial average, with decreased precipitation in southern regions and increased precipitation as well. Crop yields will be reduced due to periodic failures caused by weather changes. This report, plus the continued discussion in Europe and other parts of the globe, remind us that we are in a changing climate, a climate that will alter weather patterns significantly. This slide, which was developed back a few years ago, shows where those areas of challenge are, where there's an economic water scarcity. Egypt itself is under a physical water scarcity, as are other parts of the Middle East, as well as in Mexico and the southwestern part of the United States and southeastern part of Australia. The world is under some challenges in water availability. We know about the reality of these effects and what we must do to respond. This list is only a partial list of the weather-related impacts on agriculture during the last few years. In Australia in 2007, and 10, in Pakistan, in Russia, in Thailand, in the U.S. in 2011, in the U.S. in 2012. The high temperatures and low rainfall reduced corn production by greater than 15% and soya production. In Ethiopia and Sudan and other parts of East Africa, we recognize as being in periodic famine conditions. So we know that weather affects agriculture significantly. The question is, can the new seed technologies help to mitigate against those changes or adapt to the changes based upon changing varieties of crops? And I think the answer is yes. And that's some of the next challenges. This is an example of what we saw in the U.S. this year of record drought and high temperatures. As a consequence of high temperatures that most of you know in your part of the world, high temperatures can reduce the fertility, the inability of pollen to germinate, and so seeds are not formed or are formed very inefficiently. And that's what happened this year. We had very high temperatures at the wrong time, and that's the issue. What will the pattern be of high temperature, of drought, of floods, and how will we develop our agriculture to be resilient against those challenges in the future? Now, the next few slides, I want to show you that this research is done both in the public sector and the private sector. And the public sector, including government labs such as those at Cairo University, AGIRI, and other laboratories around Egypt. I've had the privilege of visiting some of those institutions in the past and look forward to returning in the future, because they are places where science and technology have been developed and can be applied to agriculture. They can be done either themselves or in collaboration with the private sector and international collaborators. This is a slide which shows an example of, in the top of China, of a drought-tolerant rice developed in China. In the middle, a heat tolerance to canola. As you know, it's a cool weather crop, but it now can grow in higher temperatures because of some genetic engineering. Monsanto and their drought-tolerant maize that you see. The slide is from Science in 2008. Science has moved on since that time, and new advances are now showing that there should be, it's expected to be, drought-tolerant and heat-tolerant crops available for commercialization in the next few years. But again, by both the private sector and the public sector. These are other examples of how the public sector and the private sector, either alone or in partnerships, have been able to develop other varieties. And I make the point because it's important that this science not be seen as a science of the rich or the science of the big companies, but a science that's accessible to every university breeder across the world. This is a knowledge-based industry or knowledge-based science, and as a consequence, this knowledge that we might publish in the U.S. is available around the world, and from Egypt, available around the world to us. So these are examples of research progress made in both the public and the private sector on insect-resistant eggplants, potato, plums, virus resistance, drought-tolerant sugarcane that I saw in Indonesia, crops that increase nutrition, including these that are shown here. These are only the starts of what will be the future. A few examples. This is insect-resistant eggplant that was developed in India as a consequence of collaboration between the public government universities and Mexico Seeds and their partners internationally. It's quite a remarkable effect. Now, the impact of this crop is that the farmers should need to plant crops, should need to use less chemical insecticide to control the insects. This is insect-resistant potato, which was developed in Bulgaria and completed in 2005. And you see that the panel on the left-hand side shows insect attack in the center, and then you see on the right-hand side those that are resistant to insect attack. This is some field examples of virus-resistant Phaseolus vulgaris developed by Embrapa, the government laboratories in Brasilia, Brazil. And you see that the crop that's in the upper right hand, that's panel number B, shows are smaller, and they're yellowish in color as shown in panel D. You can see that on the right hand side, A and C, that these plants are healthier. They are resistant to the Gemini virus bean golden mosaic. This is an example that was actually developed at the Danforth Plant Science Center, a project to develop virus resistance in cassava, again a virus resistance against a Gemini virus, using technologies that are now nearly 25 years old. In fact, I'm pleased that the first inventions or first discovery of this kind of work was done in my lab in 1985. So this is an older technology, but it's still very, very effective. More importantly, it's easily done. It's easily accomplished by advanced laboratories in Egypt, advanced laboratories in India, and in China, and in Southeast Asia, and so forth. So what's going to make this work? One of the things that I didn't mention as I went through those last few slides is how few of those examples have actually made it to commercialization. The project on potatoes in Bulgaria was stopped when Bulgaria chose to enter the European Union. And as a consequence, they needed to stop all genetic engineering of plants because it's not a policy that one state in the Union can sell GM crops to another state in the Union. But we know this. These are the kind of things that we know after the last 20 years. Extensive research in the US, the European Union, China, etc., confirm the process of genetic engineering per se is safe. We know the primary goal of regulators is to ensure the safety of the food and the safety of the process. We now know that that food is in fact safe. Issues related to safety of the crop are similar to crops developed by plant breeding and other technologies: irradiation, chemical mutagenesis, wide species crosses, tissue culture, and so forth. The process of itself and the products that have been developed and approved for sale on the marketplace are as safe, if not safer, than those that are developed by standard breeding. So it begs the question of why there is still some argument, some discussion after 20 years. And one needs to ask why are there still those who would deny access of this technology to those who would use it, who would need it, who could employ it to reduce the use of chemical pesticides, to increase the quality of food, to increase the amount of food. The issue really comes down to this latter statement, and that is that it's important that the right regulatory processes be in place. But the question is, for each country, what is the right regulatory process? The right regulatory process that many of us imagine or consider is similar to what we might have in the US, but which learns from the history of the past. In the last 15 years, we've learned that Bt genes, those genes which control and confer insect resistance, are safe. They are safe in the diet. They don't cause allergenic reactions. They're safe in the environment. So one wonders how much we have learned, and are we ready to move forward to advanced uses of these proteins? We know that pathogen-derived resistance is a natural way to enhance, a breeding way, a genetic way to enhance innate immunity in crops. We now, and as a period of safe use has shown us that this is something that should be almost an off-the-shelf technology. There are new technologies to protect against head blight in wheat and corn smut and wheat streak and even UG99, this dangerous pathogen that's now we see in in parts of Africa and in the US and Mexico as well. The future will be to develop durable resistance mechanisms against these and other pathogens, to develop crops that are resistant to nematodes so that we don't have to fumigate the soil, to develop crops that are resistant to insects, including whiteflies and aphids, the piercing, sucking insects that are so damaging in your part of the globe, in your agriculture. Science and technology can help us get there, but it can only be applied if there are right policies in place. And the learnings that we've had out of the last several decades have shown us that we have a great future. But that future depends upon the willingness of regulatory processes to adapt to these previous technologies. Technology is moving forward. And if these older policies prevent us from adapting the next new policy, the next new technologies, we wonder how long it will be before the world will be able to use the advanced knowledge that's being developed in our university laboratories and is applied in our private sector laboratories, the discoveries that will make to a truly sustainable biological world. And those changes that we see should lead to greater familiarity with the science and technology. It should lead to rational regulatory changes for the public and the private sector enterprises that develop the seeds. It may force some changes in the way seeds are distributed and how they're valued. At the end of the day, our hope is that the science and technology will benefit society. The farmers must make a living. They must find a way of benefiting from their hard labors. Too often we undervalue the producers, the farmers. They must make a living. At the same time, they must do it in a way that leads in sustainable agriculture methodologies to ensure that the land that they pass on in the future will be equally as good as they have today or better. And I think science and technology will help us to get there. The vast majority of us in the science and technology field recognize that science will lead us forward. So in summary, I leave you with a few things. Agriculture, biotechnology, and GM crops bring significant benefits to farmers, to the environment, and to consumers. Secondly, agriculture biotechnologies are being developed by both the private and public sectors. In fact, far more scientists are engaged in this science and technology in the public sector than in private companies. Changing climate and growing demands require advanced seed technologies as one of the tools to increase agriculture productivity, even in the face of change of weather patterns. And in my opinion, if you allow me to give just a sentence or so, I think Egypt's agricultural success will be enhanced by employing advanced seed technologies. I'm confident that what we've learned here, what your scientists have learned in Egypt, what others around Africa, the northern part of Africa and the Middle East have learned, has shown us that there is room and an important component of the future lies in developing better seeds. You have an important meeting ahead of you. I hope the following discussion that involves the farmers from around the globe, from discussions with others that will be there, the discussion about biosafety protocols, the discussion about the new science and technology that's leading the world in new ways, in producing new knowledge that will be useful in the future, in the way that we build agriculture for a global society, for success in this century as well as in the next, so we have a sustainable world to leave to our colleagues and to our families, our children and our grandchildren, ensuring that we have sufficient land to feed people, sufficient clean water, and sufficient energy that everyone can benefit from the use of the knowledge that we have generated in this decade, in the next decades, and in this century. Thank you for listening. I look forward to some questions perhaps at the end of the day when I'll join you again on a video conference. At least that's the plan. Dr. Nagla, thank you for inviting me to participate, and I wish you a wonderful and a successful conference. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.